So as the story goes, there was a moment when humanity was united as one.
All people on the earth had one language and the same words. When they traveled east, they found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them hard." They used bricks for stones and asphalt for mortar. They said, "Come, let's build for ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky, and let's make a name for ourselves so that we won't be dispersed over all the earth." Then the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the humans built. And the Lord said, "There is now one people, and they all have one language. This is what they have begun to do, and now all that they plan to do will be possible for them. Come, let's go down and mix up their language there, so they won't understand each other's language." Then the Lord dispersed them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore it is named Babel, because there the Lord mixed up the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over all the earth.
For a moment, the relatively small number of people were united. It was a unity, though, that no longer acknowledged any power greater than themselves. They believed that they had developed the technology to build these towers and these cities, that they could reach heaven on their own. They had outgrown God. And it's always been God's will that humanity be reconciled with one another and with God. It's a concept of healthy communion and covenant with God and with one another. Now, fast forward from the time of that story to the world of today. Now, I don't know if you have jumped on the bandwagon yet, but this last week, big news, O.J. Simpson joined Twitter. And as of this morning, I checked, he has 783,000 followers. 1 week. I was taking an Introduction to African American Studies course at the University of Minnesota when O.J. drove that white Bronco and was arrested for the murder of his ex-wife and Ronald Goldman. And it was a boring class, but it got lively really fast. At that time, 80% of the people who think of themselves as white thought that O.J. was guilty. And at the very same time, 80%, over 80% of African Americans thought there was good reason to doubt his guilt. Huge dividing wall. Now, the conversations that I had in that class and in our church community at that time, they were life-changing for me. Because back in the 90s, at that point, I wanted to believe that people were united, or at least mostly so. I wanted to think that my experience, which looking back was really narrow, but my experience was normal. Or at least I thought it should be normal for everybody. Today, decades later, I still have this vision for a world of people living in healthy communion and caring for one another. That we are reconciled by a love that is greater than any of us.
Christ is our peace. He made both Jews and Gentiles into one group. With his body, he broke down the barrier of hatred that divided us. He canceled the detailed rules of the law so that he could create one new person out of the two groups, making peace. He reconciled them both as one body to God by the cross, which ended the hostility to God.
in everything that he was and everything that he is, Jesus can be our peace. Jesus is God's answer to Babel. That somehow through him, through his all-inclusive teachings, through his ministry that insisted on justice for all people, through his very broken body, he broke down the walls that divide us. But I am still babbling. We all are. We make excuses for maintaining the walls that divide us, and that is babbling. I babbled on Monday at the Moore Squared Kansas Issues to Action Night. Now, Moore Squared, if you don't know what it is, Moore Squared is a community organizing group that we work with as a congregation to address racial, economic, equity issues in our area. And they do challenging work. They do work, honestly, sometimes that pushes me out of my comfort zone. And for the last 6 months, now if you remember last year, we as a congregation, we did a survey to find out what are the most important issues that you see us face as a congregation. And the number one issue was immigration at that time. And so for the last 6 months, beginning of the year, I started working with the immigration task force. Now, most of the issues that we've been dealing with in our monthly meetings and in the email conversations, most of those issues have been focused on Wyandotte County. But most of the people who are on the task force are from Johnson County. Do you see how this might go? Now, I'm sometimes unsure which wall, which border divides us more, state line or the Wyandotte-Johnson County border. And so I'm thinking, should I, as somebody who lives in Johnson County, should I have a voice in the issues of KCK? Likewise, should people from KCMO, should they have a right to tell the people of the city of Prairie Village how they should do things differently? Is it right for me to tell a person living in KCK that their city should offer and honor the photo IDs that come through the National Safe and Welcoming Program? And as a Christian, as a part of this church community, I'm trying to figure out how to navigate all these walls. The racial walls, the political walls, the religious walls. And I want to honor the diversity and the integrity of our differences with a vision for unity of all people living in healthy communion and care for one another. And my mind is running in all sorts of directions. And then I start trying to figure out, what are the guidelines? What are the policies? All this going on in my head. And so I start babbling, which is what I'm doing here. I start making excuses for the walls that divide us. So what about you? Earlier I had asked what is that one wall that if it was up to you, maybe it's even a wall that you think might even be necessary, but one wall that you'd love to see come down, what is that wall? What is that wall for you? And just shout it out. Or just say it. Come on, even at the first service, they were brave enough. Racial justice, okay. Gender equity. Intolerance as a rule, okay. Poverty. Insecurity, okay. I'd love to say more about that, but that's not the time for right now. But yeah, what else? Economic. In all of these issues, there's this temptation for us to create policies, guidelines to address these walls. That's a very human thing to do. We create policies because policies, they do help. They help us to tolerate each other. A policy can help us work together even when there's a wall present. Policies are a very human way of overcoming Babel, overcoming our differences. But here's the thing. Policies, they do help us tolerate each other. Policies, though, do not break down the walls of hate, of discrimination. They may repress them, but they don't break them down. They don't actually stop what divides us. Policies do not build a united human family. Jesus did not die so that I can have a policy. I'm here today because I want Jesus. I want something more. I want Jesus. I want that true sense of insisting on justice and equity for all people. The justice of the best schools and the best hospitals for my neighbors in Wyandotte, for my neighbors in Malawi, or just the simple justice of being safe to walk or to drive without regard to the tone of your skin or the brand of your car. And that peace, it won't come by policy. It's got to come from a place of love. It's got to come from relationships. Jesus, in his ministry, he did not come to issue a policy paper to the Roman Empire saying, this is how you do it. He came and he demonstrated, he crossed the walls that divide, and he ate. He sat down with the rich and with the poor and ate with them, made friends with them. He healed the Roman centurion's son, the most powerful person. And then he went out to the untouchables, to the lepers, and offered them the same healing. He himself, he was challenged to care for people from other nations just as much as he cared for his own people, his own nation. But in all these things, it was always relational. Christ is our peace. He reconciles us as one body in his way of getting people to actually get together. Here's what I am learning from More Squared. Now, as a church, we aren't going to be Christ's body by finding the best policy, the best theology, the best politics. We're going to do it, each of us, as we reach out intentionally beyond our walls. Even if you didn't say it, you had a wall in your mind today. So maybe when you host a Turkish family, immigrant family in your home, when we do that with the Dialogue Institute, it can feel awkward and weird. I get that. When you go to the Issues to Action night with More Squared, that meets up in a Black Baptist church in KCK. Each month, though, when you go to that meeting, you know what they're going to do? Because they do it every month. More Squared asks for every person who's there to schedule and do what they call a one-to-one meeting. And it's spending about 45 minutes getting together with someone that you don't know well, who's probably on the different side of a wall or some sort of divide than you are. I have been putting off regularly doing one-to-ones successfully for 2 years. I have put them off. I have every excuse in the book. I've been doing it for 2 years. I can give you any excuse you need to put it off. I have years of babbling experience. But my truth was that I would rather be associated with a group, church, More Squared, any of it. I would rather be associated with a group of good intent that has good policies than actually work at a relationship, a living relationship with someone beyond a wall that divides me. But policies are not the Jesus way. So each month, over the last 6 months, this was a New Year's resolution if you haven't got that whole thing going yet. So each month I've started meeting with people who are on different sides of walls dividing us. And I've used the format of these one-to-one meetings. And I want to tell you straight now, I have not brought about world peace. But I am babbling less. And I'm building relationships with people I'm really starting to care about who I wouldn't have otherwise. I'm starting to lean in with wonder, hearing the stories from somebody whose life experience is totally different than mine. And so here's my challenge to you and on your journey this summer. Invite someone. Maybe do it with a couple people. But invite someone that you don't know who may be on the other side of that wall that you named today. Reach out and invite them into a one-to-one conversation. What we do as church, if we're going to do this church thing, we are going to work to tear down the walls that divide us. And in Jesus' way, that starts by reaching out with a spirit of hope and curiosity to other people. And it takes a person. It's going to take you having the courage to work on building those relationships by speaking the truth, your truth, in love. It's all the stuff that we've talked about these past few weeks. But it's going to take you, because it doesn't just happen. And it doesn't just happen by policy. It takes you. It takes the willingness and the courage to lean in with that sense of wonder and do that thing to reach out to somebody on the other side of the wall that you want to break down. But if you weren't getting it, it's going to take you. If you need some help connecting with somebody, I'm here. I would be honored to help you reach out to extend the influence of the one who loves to reconcile folk on earth. Christ is our peace. But it's going to take you. You with God's Spirit inside of you to stop babbling and work for the peace that we need. This is the good news that you and I are called to be part of today. So will you pray with me? Spirit of curiosity, move me to ministries of grace, reaching out to break down each wall or fence. Grant me courage to love as you love, with grace and peace. Amen. Let's continue that prayer now by standing and uniting together in song called As Partners in Christ's Service. It's number 495 in the hymnal or on the screen.